The parking lot buzzed with the usual chaos of a busy afternoon. Shoppers juggled bags, kids dashed around with sticky fingers and loud laughs, and car horns blared intermittently. Among the humdrum activities, an older woman stood near the entrance of the store, her face tight with disapproval. Her sharp eyes zeroed in on a young black teen who was loading groceries into the back of a sleek black SUV. At first, no one seemed to notice her. The teen, maybe 16 or 17, moved with ease, tossing bags into the trunk and occasionally glancing at his phone. He wore a hoodie and sneakers, his earbuds tucked in, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. The woman took a step closer, her expression darkening. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the background noise like a knife. "Hey you! What do you think you're doing?" she barked, her tone a mix of accusation and condescension. The boy froze mid-motion, one hand still gripping a bag of groceries. He pulled out an earbud, turning to face her with a look of mild confusion. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice steady but cautious. "You don't belong here," she snapped, gesturing toward the car as if it were evidence in a trial. "Is that even your car? Where's your family? You think you can just waltz into this neighborhood and—" "Ma'am, I'm just loading groceries," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "This is my dad's car." Her scoff was loud enough to draw the attention of a few passers-by. "Oh, really? Your dad's car, huh?" "Sure it is." She crossed her arms and glared at him, as if daring him to prove her wrong. People began to pause, their casual conversations fading as they turned to watch the scene unfold. The teen's calm demeanor seemed to fuel her rage, and she stepped even closer. "I don't know what scam you're pulling, but I've seen your kind before," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The boy's face remained unreadable, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm not stealing anything. Maybe you should take a step back." The woman wasn't deterred. In fact, his composed response seemed to embolden her. "Oh, don't you tell me to step back. You don't get to talk to me like that," she hissed. "People like you think you can get away with anything these days." By now, a small crowd had gathered, murmurs rippling through the group. Some looked uncomfortable, others whispered to one another, and a few had their phones out, recording the altercation. But no one stepped in. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Just when it seemed like the situation couldn't escalate any further, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. A tall man in a tailored suit and polished shoes strode toward the car, his presence commanding attention. The crowd shifted, eyes darting between him and the woman. The teen's face lit up with relief as the man approached. "Dad," he said simply, his tone carrying a weight of familiarity and respect. The woman's expression faltered for the first time. She glanced at the man, then back at the boy, as if trying to piece together a puzzle that suddenly didn't make sense. "Wait, you're his—" she started, her voice losing its edge. The man's gaze landed on her, cool and unyielding. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with authority. The woman stammered, her earlier confidence evaporating. The crowd leaned in, waiting to see what would happen next. Who was this man? Why did his presence shift the dynamic so drastically? And why did the boy call him Dad? As the man locked eyes with the woman, her face went pale, and the realization seemed to hit her like a freight train. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their curiosity turning into shock as someone finally recognized who the man was. But before anyone could voice it aloud, he turned back to his son with a faint smile. "Let's go," he said, his voice steady. "We've got places to be." And just like that, the moment was over, or so it seemed. But for everyone watching, the unanswered question lingered: who was this man, and how had his presence alone managed to change everything? As the man and the teen climbed into the sleek black SUV, the crowd remained rooted in place, the weight of the moment holding them there. Some people whispered guesses about the man's identity, while others scrolled furiously on their phones, hoping to connect a face to a name. The woman stood frozen, her earlier hostility replaced by a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came. The car's engine purred to life, and in seconds they were gone, leaving the woman standing alone, her indignation now a hollow echo. Inside the SUV, the atmosphere was calm but charged. The man glanced at his son in the passenger seat, his sharp eyes scanning him for any signs of distress. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low and steady. The teen nodded, pulling his hood back and rubbing his temples. "Yeah, I'm good. That was weird, but I'm fine." The man exhaled, his grip on the steering wheel tightening slightly. "You handled that well. I'm proud of you." The boy turned toward the window, watching the world blur past as they drove. "Thanks, Dad," he said softly. But there was something in his tone, a flicker of unease that didn't go unnoticed. They drove in silence for a while, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. Outside, the city bustled on as if nothing unusual had happened. Traffic lights changed, pedestrians crossed streets, and the rhythms of the day continued uninterrupted. But inside the car, the air felt heavier, charged with unspoken questions. Finally, the teen broke the silence. "Do people ever stop assuming the worst?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of frustration. The man glanced at him, his expression thoughtful. "Some do. Others don't. But the important thing is how you respond. You can't control their assumptions, only your reaction." The boy nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the passing scenery. He had heard his father say similar things before, but every encounter like today's left a mark. No matter how composed he tried to be, it was hard not to feel the sting of unfair judgment. They pulled into the driveway of their home, a sprawling, modern house with clean lines and large windows that glimmered in the afternoon light. As they stepped inside, the boy dropped his bag near the door and headed for the kitchen. His father followed, loosening his tie as he went. "Do you want to talk about it?" the man asked, leaning against the counter. The boy shrugged, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "Not much to say. She assumed I was stealing because I didn't look like I belong." "Same old story?" The man sighed, crossing his arms. "It's not fair, I know. But you can't let people like her dictate how you see yourself." "I know, Dad," the boy said, his voice firm. "It's just exhausting." The man nodded, understanding all too well. He had faced his own share of prejudice over the years, though his success and influence had shielded him from much of it in recent times. Still, seeing his son go through the same struggles stirred something deep within him, a mix of anger and determination. As the evening wore on, the house settled into its usual rhythm. The teen disappeared into his room, likely to work on homework or lose himself in music, while his father retreated to his study. But the incident from the parking lot lingered in both their minds, unspoken but undeniable. In the days that followed, the story of the encounter began to spread. Someone had posted a video of the altercation online, and it quickly gained traction. The clip didn't capture the man's arrival or the reveal of his identity, but the woman's words and the boy's calm responses were enough to spark a heated discussion. Comments flooded in, ranging from outrage at the woman's behavior to praise for the teen's composure. By the time the man discovered the video, it had already amassed thousands of views. He sat at his desk, watching the footage with a carefully neutral expression. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues and friends who had seen it, some offering support, and others asking if the boy in the video was his son. He forwarded the link to his son with a simple message: "We need to talk." When the teen joined him in the study, his expression was a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What's up?" he asked, sinking into a chair. The man turned the laptop screen toward him, the video paused mid-frame. "This," he said. "It's gone viral." The boy leaned forward, his eyes widening as he took in the clip. "Seriously? Who even recorded this?" "No idea," his father replied. "But it's out there now. And people are talking." The teen sat back, his mind racing. "What are they saying?" "Mostly positive things," the man said. "But there's some backlash too. You know how these things go. People make assumptions without knowing the full story." The boy frowned, his fingers drumming on the armrest of the chair. "So what do we do?" "We stay calm," his father said firmly. "We don't let this define us. But we might need to address it if it continues to grow." The boy nodded, though his stomach churned at the thought of more attention. He had never wanted to be in the spotlight, especially not like this. Yet, as he looked at his father, he felt a surge of gratitude. He knew he wasn't facing this alone. In the days that followed, the man's identity inevitably came to light. His position as a prominent figure in the community, a successful entrepreneur, philanthropist, and advocate for social justice, added fuel to the fire. The revelation sparked a new wave of reactions, with some praising him for raising such a poised son and others questioning how the woman could have acted as she did, knowing who she was dealing with. The woman, for her part, stayed silent. She had vanished from the public eye, her social media accounts deleted or locked. But the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the spotlight grew brighter, the man and his son found themselves at the center of a broader conversation, one that would test their resilience and challenge their understanding of what it meant to stand up, not just for themselves, but for others as well. As the days passed, the online buzz around the video refused to die down. News outlets began picking up the story, with headlines that ranged from sensational to thought-provoking. Some focused on the woman's blatant prejudice, while others delved into the broader implications of racism in everyday life. For the teen, it was surreal to see his face plastered across social media and news feeds. Every time he opened his phone, there was another notification, another comment, another opinion about an incident that had started as a random afternoon errand. At school, the attention was impossible to escape. Some of his classmates approached him with words of support, while others seemed unsure of how to act, their curiosity evident in sideways glances and whispered conversations. A few, emboldened by anonymity, left snide remarks online, questioning his actions in the video or mocking the attention it had garnered. "Must be nice having a famous dad to bail you out," one message read. He ignored it, just as his father had taught him. But the words lingered, gnawing at the back of his mind. He didn't want to be known as someone who needed bailing out. He had done nothing wrong. Yet, somehow, the narrative was slipping beyond his control. At home, things weren't much easier. His father had fielded several calls from reporters, all eager to interview the man whose calm intervention had become a focal point of the story. He turned them down, insisting that this wasn't about fame or publicity. But the pressure was mounting. Advocacy groups reached out, asking if they could use the video to highlight issues of racial bias. Community leaders wanted the father and son to speak at events, to share their perspective and inspire others. The teen wasn't sure how he felt about it. Part of him wanted to help, to make something good come from the experience. But another part just wanted the world to move on, to leave him in peace. One evening, as they sat in the living room, the teen finally voiced his concerns. "Dad, why does everyone keep acting like this is such a big deal? Stuff like this happens all the time. It's not new." His father looked at him thoughtfully, setting down the book he had been reading. "You're right, it's not new. But the fact that it happens all the time is exactly why it's a big deal. People need to see it, to understand how common it is. Otherwise, they'll keep pretending it doesn't exist." The boy frowned, running a hand through his hair. "But I didn't ask to be part of this movement or whatever. I just wanted to buy groceries." I know, his father said gently. And you shouldn't have to be. But sometimes, we don't get to choose the roles we play. What matters is how we handle them. The teen sighed, leaning back against the couch. He knew his dad was right, but that didn't make it any easier. The weight of being a symbol, or a lesson, wasn't one he had ever asked for. Meanwhile, the woman at the center of the incident remained silent. But her absence only added to the speculation. Who was she? What had driven her to confront the teen in the first place? Some online sleuths claimed to have identified her, digging up old social media posts and trying to piece together her life. Others cautioned against turning the situation into a witch hunt, arguing that it was more productive to focus on the bigger picture. One evening, as the father scrolled through his emails, a new message caught his eye. It was from an unfamiliar address, and the subject line simply read, "I need to talk." He hesitated for a moment before opening it. The message was short and to the point. "I'm the woman from the video. I've been watching everything unfold, and I can't stay silent anymore. Please let me explain." The man leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but this wasn't it. He debated whether to respond, weighing the potential consequences. Was she genuinely remorseful, or was this an attempt to save face? And if she truly wanted to explain, what could she possibly say that would justify her actions? He decided to show the email to his son before making any decisions. When he did, the teen's reaction was immediate. "Why now?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. She had plenty of chances to say something before. "Maybe," his father replied. "But people don't always act rationally in the heat of the moment. Sometimes it takes time for them to reflect." The boy crossed his arms, his expression guarded. "So, what are you going to do?" "I haven't decided yet," the man admitted. "But I think we should hear her out. If nothing else, it might bring some closure." The teen wasn't convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. "All right. But if she tries to twist the story, I'm out." His father smiled faintly. "Fair enough." As they crafted a reply to the email, the father and son couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into uncharted territory. The conflict, which had once seemed so clear-cut, was beginning to blur at the edges. And as they prepared for what came next, they both knew that the answers they sought might only lead to more questions. The email reply was brief but left the door open. The man had crafted it carefully, balancing curiosity with caution. "We're open to hearing what you have to say. Let us know when and where you'd like to meet." The message was sent with a sense of finality, but it wasn't long before a response came through. The woman suggested a neutral location, a quiet CAF on the edge of town. The teen wasn't thrilled about going, but his father insisted. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to," he told him. "But I think it's important that you're there. This is as much your experience as it is mine." The boy reluctantly agreed, though his apprehension was clear. On the day of the meeting, they arrived early, choosing a table near the back where they could talk without drawing too much attention. The CAF was small and cozy, the low hum of conversation providing a layer of privacy. When the woman finally arrived, her presence was almost unrecognizable from the fiery figure in the parking lot. She looked nervous, her posture stiff and her gaze darting around the room as if expecting judgment from every corner. She hesitated near the entrance before spotting them and walking over. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly, her voice a far cry from the harsh tone they remembered. She took a seat across from them, clutching her bag like a lifeline. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with tension, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on them. Finally, the man broke the silence. "We're here to listen," he said simply. The woman nodded, taking a deep breath before beginning. "First, I want to say that I'm sorry. To both of you. What I did was wrong, and I have no excuse for it." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed on. "I've spent the last few days watching that video, reading the comments, and realizing how deeply I messed up. I can't even begin to imagine how that felt for you." The teen shifted in his seat, unsure how to respond. He looked at his father, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. "Why did you do it?" the boy finally asked, his voice steady but filled with genuine curiosity. The woman winced at the question, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I saw something that didn't fit into my idea of what was normal, and I reacted without thinking. I know that sounds terrible, it is terrible, but that's the truth." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unsatisfying. The teen frowned, leaning forward. "You didn't even stop to think for a second? You just assumed I was up to no good because of how I look?" "I'm ashamed to say yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I hate that about myself. I've been trying to figure out why I reacted that way, and the only answer I keep coming back to is fear that was never justified, but was there all the same." The father listened intently, his expression unreadable. "Fear," he repeated, his tone thoughtful. "Fear of what, exactly?" The woman hesitated, searching for the right words. "Fear of the unknown, I suppose? Of people I don't understand. It's not something I'm proud of, and it's not something I want to be true about me. That's why I wanted to meet you, to apologize, yes, but also to learn. I need to do better. I want to do better." Her sincerity was evident, but it didn't erase the damage done. The teen folded his arms, his gaze fixed on her. "Do you know what it's like to have people look at you and just decide you don't belong?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "It's not fear for us, it's exhausting. And it doesn't go away when the apology comes." The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "I can't imagine how hard that must be. I've been so blind to how my actions affect others, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm going to work on myself. I need to be better for you, for people like you, and for my own family." The conversation continued, tense but civil. The woman shared bits of her background, a life shaped by insular communities and limited exposure to people outside her comfort zone. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it offered context. The father listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that probed deeper into her perspective. The teen remained quieter, his emotions a swirl of anger, sadness, and cautious hope. As they wrapped up the meeting, the woman stood, clutching her bag tightly. "Thank you for giving me the chance to explain," she said. "I'll never stop regretting what I did, but I'm grateful you were willing to listen." The man nodded, his expression calm but firm. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said. "But acknowledgement is a start." The teen said nothing, watching as she walked away. Once she was gone, he turned to his father. "Do you think she really meant it?" His father sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I think she believes she did. Whether that belief turns into action is up to her." The boy nodded slowly, his thoughts still churning. The meeting had answered some questions, but it hadn't erased the pain or resolved the lingering tension. As they left the CAF, the teen couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over, that this moment was just another step in a larger journey. And as they stepped into the crisp evening air, the question of what came next loomed larger than ever. As they walked back to the car, the teen couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered after their conversation with the woman. Something about her explanation felt incomplete, as if there were pieces of the puzzle still missing. His father seemed calm, his demeanor unreadable as always, but the teen knew him well enough to recognize the subtle tension in his jawline. "She said the right things," the boy muttered as they climbed into the car. "But do you really think she's going to change?" His father glanced at him before starting the engine. "People are complicated. Sometimes they surprise you for better or worse. We can't control what she does from here, but we can decide how we let it affect us. The drive home was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The boy replayed the meeting over and over in his head, dissecting the woman's words, her expressions, the way her voice wavered. Was it guilt? Fear? Or something else entirely? He hated how much space she was taking up in his mind, as if she had somehow hijacked his life yet again. When they got home, the teen retreated to his room, hoping to drown out his thoughts with music. But his phone buzzed before he could press play. Another notification. He groaned, half expecting it to be another comment about the video. But when he unlocked his screen, it wasn't a comment, it was a direct message. The sender's username was unfamiliar, but the message sent a chill down his spine. You don't know the full story. Be careful who you trust. He stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The message felt ominous, like a warning, but it was too vague to make sense of. He debated whether to show it to his dad, but something held him back. Maybe it was the cryptic nature of the words or the fear of overreacting, but he decided to sit with it for a while and see if more context emerged. The next day at school, the tension escalated. A few students had started to use the video as fuel for their own agendas. Some stood up for him, using the incident to spark discussions about prejudice and systemic racism. Others whispered behind his back, accusing him of seeking attention or playing the victim. But the real surprise came during lunch, when one of the quieter kids, a girl who rarely spoke to anyone, approached him. "Can I sit here?" she asked, clutching her tray nervously. Yeah, sure," he said, sliding his bag out of the way. She sat down and leaned in, lowering her voice. "I saw the video. And I know you've probably been hearing this a lot, but I think what you did was really brave." "Thanks," he said, though the compliment felt like a double-edged sword. He hadn't felt brave in that moment, just tired and frustrated. "There's something else," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "That woman. I think I know her." He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've seen her before," she said. "She used to work with my mom. And trust me, there's more to her story than she's letting on." His pulse quickened as he leaned closer. "What kind of more?" The girl hesitated, glancing around the cafeteria as if to make sure no one was listening. "My mom said she was involved in some shady stuff. Like not just personal biases, but actual organized groups. The kind that don't just stop at words." The boy felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Are you serious?" She nodded. "I don't know all the details, but my mom always said she was trouble. I just thought you should know." He didn't know what to say. His mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Was this why the woman had reached out? Had her apology been a cover for something darker? And what did this mean for him and his dad, now that they had publicly engaged with her? When he got home that afternoon, he couldn't keep the information to himself. He found his father in the study, going through a stack of papers. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, his voice urgent. His father looked up, concern flickering in his eyes. "What's going on?" The boy explained everything: the message on his phone, the girl's warning, and the unsettling possibility that the woman's actions might be part of something much bigger. His father listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with every word. "This changes things," his father said when the boy finished. "If what she said is true, then her apology might not have been as innocent as it seemed." "So what do we do?" the boy asked, his stomach twisting with anxiety. "We tread carefully," his father said. "And we find out the truth." The next few days were a whirlwind of quiet investigation. The man reached out to a few trusted contacts, people who might have insight into the woman's past. Meanwhile, the boy kept an eye on his phone, half expecting another cryptic message to appear. Every moment felt charged, like the calm before a storm. And as they delved deeper into the mystery, they began to realize that the incident in the parking lot might have been the tip of the iceberg. The stakes were higher than they'd ever imagined, and the answers they sought were drawing them closer to a dangerous truth. The tension had reached a boiling point by the time they pieced together the scattered fragments of information. Through his father's network, they learned that the woman had indeed been associated with a local group known for its divisive and discriminatory rhetoric. It wasn't overtly violent, but its members had a history of intimidation tactics and spreading hateful ideologies under the guise of community protection. The revelation cast her apology in a stark new light. The father and son debated their next move. The teen wanted to confront her, to force her to admit the truth, but his father urged caution. "We need to be smart about this," he said. "If we rush in, we might make things worse." But it seemed the choice was taken out of their hands. Late one evening, the woman reached out again, this time asking for a private phone call. Her message was urgent, almost desperate. "There's something I need to tell you. Please, it's important." Despite their reservations, they agreed to the call. As the phone rang, the teen sat beside his father, his nerves on edge. When the woman answered, her voice was unsteady, and the tension was palpable. "I know you've probably heard things about me," she began, her words coming quickly, as if she were racing against her own fear. "And most of it is true. I used to be part of a group one I'm not proud of. But I've been trying to leave it behind. Why didn't you tell us this before?" the father asked, his tone measured but firm. "Because I was scared," she admitted. "You don't just walk away from people like that. They don't take betrayal lightly. But after what happened in the parking lot, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I knew I had to change." Her words sounded genuine, but the teen wasn't convinced. "So what do you want from us?" he asked bluntly. "Forgiveness? A free pass?" "No," she said quickly. "I don't expect anything from you. I need you to know that I'm not proud of who I was. And I need your help." "Help?" The father's eyebrows knit together. "What kind of help?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "They're watching me. Ever since the video went viral, they think I've been compromised. I think they might try to use you to send a message." The teen's stomach dropped. His father stiffened beside him, the gravity of her words sinking in. "What kind of message?" the man asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his eyes. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "But I overheard them talking. They think you're making them look weak, and they don't like that. I just thought you should know." The call ended shortly after, leaving them with more questions than answers. The next few days were tense as they tried to go about their lives while remaining hyper-aware of their surroundings. The father contacted law enforcement, sharing what they had learned, but there was little they could do without concrete evidence of a threat. One evening, as the teen walked home from a friend's house, he noticed a car idling at the corner near their street. At first, he thought it was a neighbor or someone lost, but as he approached, the car's headlights turned off, and it began to slowly roll forward. His instincts screamed at him to run, and he took off, his heart pounding in his chest. When he burst through the door of their house, breathless and pale, his father was already on alert. "What happened?" he asked, grabbing his phone. "There was a car," the teen gasped. "I think they were following me." The father immediately called the police, reporting the suspicious vehicle. As they waited for officers to arrive, he locked the doors and kept a close eye on the windows. The teen felt a mixture of fear and frustration, fear for their safety and frustration at how quickly their lives had spiraled out of control. When the police arrived, they conducted a search of the neighborhood but found no trace of the car. The encounter left them shaken, but it also strengthened their resolve. They wouldn't let fear control them, and they wouldn't be silenced. The climax came the next day, when the woman unexpectedly showed up at their door. She looked more frazzled than ever, her eyes darting nervously as if she were being followed. "I think they're onto me," she said, her voice a frantic whisper. "I don't know where else to go." The father hesitated, torn between compassion and caution. Before he could decide what to do, there was a sudden loud knock at the door. Everyone froze. The knock came again, more insistent this time. The father motioned for his son to stay back as he approached the door, peering through the peephole. On the other side stood a man he didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, and intimidating. The man knocked again, his expression unreadable. "Who is it?" The father called out, his voice calm but firm. The man didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. After a tense moment, the woman stepped forward, her face pale. "It's one of them," she whispered. The father's mind raced. If they opened the door, they risked confrontation. If they didn't, it might escalate things further. Finally, he made a decision. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, loudly stating their address and explaining the situation. When the man outside heard this, he lingered for another moment before walking away, his heavy footsteps echoing down the driveway. It was a moment of relief but also a reminder of the danger that still loomed. The police arrived soon after, taking statements and advising them to stay vigilant. The woman, shaken but determined, promised to cooperate fully with the authorities, finally ready to sever ties with her past for good. As the night settled, the teen sat with his father in the living room, the adrenaline slowly fading. "Do you think it's over?" he asked quietly. His father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Maybe not yet," he said. "But we're closer than we were before. And no matter what, we'll face it together." In the days that followed, the incident brought unexpected allies, neighbors, community members, and even strangers who rallied around them, proving that while fear and hate might be loud, they would never be stronger than unity and courage. And for the father and son, it was a reminder that while the fight for justice was never easy, it was always worth it. The days after the incident at the door were a strange mix of tension and relief. While the immediate danger seemed to have passed, the reality of what they had been through lingered like a shadow over their lives. The police had assured them that the matter was being taken seriously. They had increased patrols in the neighborhood and were investigating the groups connected to the woman's past. Yet, the unease wasn't something that could be switched off with a simple promise of safety. The teen found himself replaying everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it all. The woman's transformation, the threats, the car that had followed him, all of it felt surreal. He couldn't decide whether to feel angry, scared, or just exhausted. His father had always been his rock, but even he seemed more subdued than usual, his thoughtful silences stretching longer as he grappled with what had nearly happened. One afternoon, a week after the encounter, the teen found himself sitting on the porch, staring out at the quiet street. The sun was shining, kids were playing down the block, and for a moment, everything seemed deceptively normal. But the heaviness in his chest remained. "Mind some company?" his dad asked, stepping outside with 2 glasses of iced tea. The boy nodded, grateful for the distraction. His father handed him a glass and sat down beside him. For a while, either of them spoke. The sounds of the neighborhood filled the silence, a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. "Dad," the boy said finally, "do you think she really changed? I mean, do you think someone like that can ever actually leave their past behind?" His father took a sip of tea, considering the question. "I think change is possible," he said carefully. "But it's not easy. And it doesn't happen just because you want it to. It takes work, hard, uncomfortable work. And even then, it takes time for people to trust that the change is real." The boy nodded, his gaze distant. "It's just, I keep wondering if we did the right thing, meeting with her, listening to her. What if it made things worse?"